Keith Law, ESPN.com senior baseball writer, worked in the front office for the Toronto Blue Jays, the Major League Baseball draft, the Phillies system, the direction of this team, and how has Matt Klentak done? We bring in Keith Law, who joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Well, Keith, over the years, you and I have talked a lot, and, Ruben Amaro was getting hammered for a lot of things. And it's put that team in a position where they, were really behind. They took too long to rebuild that thing. But do you like the direction of where this team is now? On the field, they're terrible. It seems that they've taken a step back. But does the on-the-field product this year paint the picture of where their organization is?
But I think the big problem is that people saw the team last year and said, oh, this rebuild's not going to be that bad. It's not going to take that long for the roster to turn over. Some of these guys are better than we thought, and it turns out, no, most of these guys are kind of exactly what we thought they were, and it's disappointing, and I'm sure the Phillies front office is disappointed too that Jared Eichhoff maybe isn't the found money that they thought he was. Maikel Franco continues to make no progress in his command of the strike zone, but most of the talent in the system is still in the minor leagues, and it's close. A lot of it is just in Lehigh Valley now, and it's going to be up, I think, fairly soon. By the time we get to Labor Day, I think a bunch of those guys are going to be in the big leagues, but it's still going to be a long process, and it's probably exactly what Andy McPhail and Matt Klentak sold Phillies ownership on, but that doesn't change the fact that, it's going to take a long time to get to the point where this team is really competitive in the NL East again.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the younger players, Eichhoff, Nola's another one there, Franco. What would you do with Franco? The guy's struggling big time. I mean, obviously they put a lot on this kid's plate. Do you keep him up here? How do you play a kid like Franco?
Well, so I was always a bit of a skeptic on Franco because he's strong as anything. I mean, his hands, wrists are incredibly strong. It's real power. He is his command, in terms of balls and strikes, just his understanding of that, his swing decisions are just not that good. I think part of it is that he knows he can get a ball out of the strike zone and still hit it pretty hard. But in the big leagues, pitchers will take advantage of that. I think there's no advantage whatsoever in thinking about sending him down. You can't send him down. You can't bench him. He just needs to keep playing. And you're just trying to get through to him to make him understand that the reason you're struggling is the decisions you're making at the plate. He has the physical ability to be a pretty good offensive player, but he's going to have to get himself into more advantageous counts and try to get to points where pitchers are, try to get himself in situations where pitchers are going to throw his pitch in his count and something he can recognize. I just don't see any reason to do anything but continue to play him every day. The most you might do is drop him in the lineup, maybe just to get him into situations where maybe it matters less if he makes an out, because you're trying to work on developing him, not so much on trying to win games.
Keith Law's with us here. Tell us a little bit about the first number 8 overall pick, Adam Hastley from Virginia. We know the baseball draft's a big crapshoot, but a lot of teams are building through the drafts recently, specifically some of the teams that are at the top of the standings right now, the Astros, the defending champion Cubs.
And I think they show you it's not a crapshoot. You just have to do a good job. It's hard. There are a lot of misses in baseball. A lot of that is because we draft high school players too. And the Phillies went with that first pick with Hastley. I think they took one of the safest guys on the board, UVA center fielder. I think he stays in center. He's an above-average runner. He's got really good instincts. He's got great hand-eye coordination. I don't know that he's going to continue to hit for the power he showed at UVA this year. He's going to switch to wood bats. Pitching will be a little bit better. But I do think he can really hit. I think he's going to be a high on-base guy, probably more doubles power than home run power, and stay in center field for them, and probably move fairly quickly. He's a guy I would expect to be in Philadelphia within 2 years.
That music to their ears, because Moniak, a kid they took out of high school last year, he's probably, 4 years, 5 years away?
Yeah, he's been just okay at low A. He's only 19 at this point, so it's not surprising either. I'm not concerned about his development, but you're probably figuring 3 years until he gets to the big leagues. And it's one of those, if they both work out, if Hastley's your major league center fielder and suddenly Moniak is banging on the door and he turns into everything you thought he was going to be, you'll figure it out. It's never a problem in baseball to have too much of something like pitching or, in this case, up-the-middle position players.
Hey, I want to get your take. They took 5 of 6 picks were college players yesterday. And when you go the college route over the high school route, is that kind of suggesting that we're hoping to get more from these guys sooner?
It can be. It can be a financial decision that high school players after the first 2 or 3 rounds often start to become very expensive, more than your slot. In baseball, you have the bonus amounts aren't fixed, but there are slot figures associated with every pick. And after the first 3 rounds or so, it can be difficult to sign high school players, especially if they've got strong college commitments, to a major SEC or ACC school. I did read from this the fact that they backed it up with those 2 college starters from California schools. They're looking to get just some pitching depth into the system fairly quickly. And the one thing I thought that they did that I thought was interesting, though, was their first pick today in the 11th round was a high school kid from Arizona who slipped on a little bit of a signability concern. That's sort of like adding another 3rd-round pick to the mix. Jake Holmes is his name. That says to me that they were probably being very cautious with their money in the first 10 rounds and felt like they could open it up a little bit today, where if you don't sign your 11th round pick, there's no penalty for it. But failing to sign someone in the first 10 rounds can screw up your bonus pool.
The kid they took real quick in the 2nd round, Spencer Howard, the Phillies director of scouting mentioned that he said he thought he was the best right-handed pitcher in the draft. When you hear something like that and he's in the 2nd round, of course, your director of scouting is going to say that. But I was wondering, okay, why is this guy falling to the 2nd round if that's the case?
How about just say you really like the player? It's fine. He was drafted 45th overall. He was 75th on my board. I just looked. Major League Baseball had him 99th on their board. Really, you're going to tell me this guy was better than Kyle Wright, who was the 5th pick in the draft? Come on.
Right.
Howard's good. He's good. I think he's a big league star.
I just thought that comment stood out a little bit,
hilarious. Right? Oh, it's absolutely hilarious. It's why be hyperbolic? He's your 2nd-round pick. We think we got a big league starter. If you get a 4th starter with your 2nd-round pick in the baseball draft, you did great. The 2nd round, half those guys will not make the big leagues, and a lot of them will just be up and down guys. So if you think you're still getting big league regulars at all after the 1st round, you're doing great. Don't hang on this kid. Oh, he's the best right-handed starter in the draft. No, he wasn't. He just wasn't.
Keith Law's with us, ESPN.com senior baseball writer. How about, you mentioned the rotation, how about a lot of these guys now? Jake Thompson, he was a big part of that Hamels deal. Here we are later. He's struggling. Eflin has been up, injured, back and forth. A lot of these names that we heard a lot about and look promising. You see Ben Lively's up now. Any of these guys looking like they have it?
I don't think any of these are long-term pieces. Thompson's the big disappointment. He's really regressed. He probably peaked at age 19, which is kind of sad. But his fastball's never been the same. He threw so many sliders when he was a teenager too, even that first year in the Tiger system. And I think he's never really quite recovered from that. But he's also lost command now. Now he's not even locating stuff like he was. When I saw him in Double-A, it was an average fastball and probably an average tick above slider, but he threw a ton of strikes, and they were good strikes. And all right, this guy can pitch in the back of a big league rotation. He can't even do that. Eflin, Lively, these guys were always going to be swingmen, 5th starter types. They're less disappointing because that's all I thought they were going to be. Thompson was the one where I think they had more invested in this guy. He was a piece of that Hamels deal that they expected to be better, and it hurts. And maybe that's why that they went for those 2 college starters, Howard and Connor Siebel, in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, because they don't have guys like that in the system. Mark Appel is there in AAA, and he's been awful. You can't pencil him in as any sort of starter going forward. So maybe they felt like they needed some bulk in their system.
How about Nola? What are you seeing from him now that he's been hurt? I know that, but he got up here pretty quickly. What is your long-term view of what he is?
Well, my real concern on him at this point is just the durability. That he's a smaller guy. He's a narrow-framed guy. That's typically something we don't think is going to. We think points maybe to a lack of durability going forward. I do think there's the stuff there for him to be a solid number 3 starter, a little better than league average starter. He throws plenty of strikes. I think he's got some swing and miss options. He's really got to stay healthy and be able to hold his stuff deep into games too, which is also, I think, a difficult thing for him. I don't know what the state of his arm is. And if there's maybe stuff that's still been bothering him this year, because he still hasn't pitched the way that I would expect him to so far this season, even when he's been back and ostensibly fully healthy.
We're talking baseball with Keith Law here. The draft, the Phillies made their pick number 8. We're looking at their minor league system. Let's look over the offensive side. If you're the Phillies right now, Hernandez is out 6 weeks. Do you bring Kingery up? Do you let him kind of hang out where he is? How do you handle that?
I would want him. He's still in Reading, right? He hasn't been promoted in the last few days. Right. I got to make sure because
he's still at Reading.
I've been buried in the draft a few days too, so stuff happens. And so, wait a minute, the world ended. I had no idea. I was buried in the 8th round here. Kingery, I like Kingery. This power surge from him is really uncharacteristic. And Reading's a great power park. I feel like we've probably talked about that a bunch of times before. I would want to at least get him a month or so in AAA against better pitching to see if whatever he's doing differently, especially if I haven't heard he's changed his swing, but let's say that he has, make sure that that's still going to work against better caliber pitching, that this is not just a Reading effect, because he's shown some power on the road too. I just never thought that's the hitter he was going to be. I thought he was going to be a doubles, triples kind of hitter, not a home run hitter. He's an outstanding runner. He's a plus defender at second. He could help this team, and I would definitely target getting him up by the end of the year. But let's get him out of that environment, too, and see what he does in a neutral environment in AAA against better quality pitching.
Yeah, he hit his 18th homer on Sunday at Reading. He's hitting .306. And, of course, the position that he plays in Philadelphia, there's a lot of comparisons to the guy who used to play there with Chase Utley, obviously. And he was a guy, Utley, that would kind of, snuck his way up here. I think Utley was a second-round pick, but, he kind of –
He was a late first-round pick, but his rep out of – he's UCLA, right?
Yep.
UCLA?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, because if I get the wrong one, that's really bad. But he was seen as he was supposed to be a butcher defensively. When he first came out of college, we can hit, but we don't know if he's going to stay in the infield. He's really not that athletic. Turned out he was way more athletic than anyone gave him credit for. And he made himself into an outstanding defensive second baseman to the point where I was just arguing on Twitter the other day. I think he's a Hall of Famer, and his defense is a huge part of that. Kingery is already, I think, an outstanding defensive second baseman. University of Arizona converted him from center field. He took to second base immediately. He's an outstanding runner. My big knock on him was not so much lack of power, but that he never saw a pitch he didn't think he could hit. And I just thought he needed to get a little bit more disciplined. That really does seem to have changed, though. He's definitely making better decisions at the plate so far this year. Maybe that's why he's hitting for more power.
All right. Give us the J.P. Crawford story. What's going on with him?
I don't know. I've asked. I sat with a scout the other day. I was watching an A-ball game, was sitting with a scout who'd seen them too, and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders. I don't know what's wrong. Definitely, there's a lot of people the last 2 years have questioned his effort level, that he's always had a thing. He doesn't really run ground balls out particularly hard. I don't care about that stuff. I care if it's translating to other parts of your game. No, I don't know. Is J.P. Crawford really just bored or disappointed that he's in AAA? Well, probably, but that shouldn't necessarily be affecting his play on the field. And if you're the Phillies, you don't want to call this guy up while he's really barely, under 200 now? He's been bouncing around 200 basically most of the season. You've got to put it in front of him and say, we're not going to call you up until you're hitting. So if this is a focus issue, it's because he's not hurt. His swing isn't bad. He's not striking out excessively. All the things you might look for to say, hey, maybe this guy's just not good enough or not ready. None of that is true. So maybe it's a situation you've got to sit down with the player and say, there's no automatic call-up to the big leagues for you here. You're going to have to earn your way there. And if you're sick of being in AAA, then show us that you need to be in the big league.
Yeah.
Give us a reason to promote you.
Well, 194 is not a reason.
No. And frankly, 224 wouldn't be a reason. It's not like he's just getting a little unlucky here. He's not doing anything on contact. And again, this is not a guy his swing isn't bad. He's not weak. Like I said, he's not striking out excessively. He's putting the ball in play a ton. It's just been weak contact. And I have not seen him this year. Scouts I've talked to who have seen him have come back to me and said, this is a guy you thought you rank as a top 10 prospect in baseball. He looks terrible. He's not doing anything on contact. And like I said, he's not playing hard, which I think just some of that is just optics, but it doesn't help. When you're not hitting, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is just play hard, so at least people recognize that you're still putting in the effort level.
And that was something that was a knock on Nick Williams as well, was that he wasn't playing hard, but he's kind of turned that around a little bit. But if you're Philadelphia, you got Maikel Saunders getting at bats, not a lot, but he was getting at bats. Do you start to say, you know what, it's time to take a look at Nick Williams? Is he at that spot now where he can't do much more? I know he's not having a great year at AAA, but he could be in that same system where, what am I still doing down here?
He's been better the last couple of weeks. At least he's starting to hit for some power, which I think is where he's going to be. He's going to be a low average, low on-base percentage power hitter, and that's fine. I mean, to some extent, you don't want to ask the player to be something he's not really capable of being. He strikes out too much. It's always going to be part of his game. If you're in their situation, though, you do want to get Williams to the big leagues at some point this year because he's performing well enough at least I think what you do is you try to get closer to the trade deadline, any of the older pieces in the outfield, like Saunders. Is there a market for him? Can we flip him even for an A-ball arm we think is interesting? Anything like that. It has the benefit of restocking the system. Saunders, obviously not a long-term piece for them anyway. And then you clear a spot. And then Williams can come up. You don't want to bring him up and not play him. You bring up a kid like that, like Crawford, like Alfaro. Any of these guys comes up, it has to be, you're coming up and we're going to play you pretty much every day for the rest of the season. So we get more of a look at you, and you get more time to develop and start to make adjustments.
Yeah, the Alfaro's the next guy because Cameron Rupp, obviously he's kind of a journeyman guy. Andrew Knapp's been all right back there, but would you rather see, if you're the Phillies front office, Jorge Alfaro getting those at-bats now?
Again, we're getting close to that point. Now, this is not a situation, like I don't think Rupp is going to have huge trade value. People love the kid. They love having him in the clubhouse, but he's not going to have a lot of trade value to other clubs. Do you call Alfaro up when he's still got a sub-300 on-base percentage? And what I hear is the work behind the plate is improved, but not all the way there. He's always been able to throw. He's got great raw power. He just tears the seams off the ball when he makes contact. But his at-bats aren't great. And what I keep hearing from scouts is he'll show you good work behind the plate, and then he'll show you not so good work behind the plate. And you cannot bring a catcher up, my opinion at least. Can't bring him up and have him work with your major league pitching staff if he's not 100% ready to put the work in behind the plate. He can still need some development, but if there's a question of how much focus he has, is he not doing the game prep, is he not involved on every pitch, he can't come up. And it's the same thing I was saying about Crawford, the message, because he's not supposed to be a bad kid. He's not a dumb kid. You tell the player, you want to get back to the big leagues? Here's what you have to do. You have to show us you're 100% committed to the defensive aspects of your job. Then we'll bring you up, even if you still have some stuff to work on at the plate.
Yeah, I heard a lot of that he does not call a great game. But how about the fact that he's got 4 walks in 209 plate appearances?
And it's his whole career, right? He probably doesn't have a whole season's worth of walks in his entire career. In fact, I was just pulling it up as we were talking. He has 121 walks in 600 career games in the minors. Yeah, that's not going to cut it.
That's pretty bad. 4 walks this year. His on-base percentage, by the way, for Alfaro, 297. That's not very good. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Your take on the two guys, Cousins and Rhys Hoskins. Are they the Darren Ruff guys, or are these guys legit? Because we keep hearing, well, Ruff, kind of screwed it over for them, that these big power guys at the AAA level, they brought Ruff up and he couldn't do anything, that these guys are being punished for that.
Ruff was 26 in AA, and I think that's the big difference between him and the two guys you're talking about. Ruff was just beating up. He was a big kid without a lot of tools other than brute strength, and he was beating up on younger pitching. Cousins and Hoskins have both been about the right age for their leagues. They're facing pitchers about their ages. I like Hoskins better. I think he's a better hitter. I think he's a more complete player. I like his approach at the plate a lot more. Cousins has some better tools. He's definitely got more raw power. He takes worse at-bats. I don't think his plate discipline is very good. He can't hit lefties at all. But I think both guys end up getting to the big leagues at some point this year. I've kind of banged the drum a little bit so far for them to bring Hoskins up because he's a little bit older. He's a college product anyway. He's been in the system for 2+ years now. It's about time. If you look at the timetable, you look at his performance everywhere, there's really nothing more for him to do or learn at AAA. And there's a chance that this guy, I think he was a 4th-round pick, he might just be better than everybody thought. I've comped him a little bit. I've called him Paul Goldschmidt light. I don't want to say he's Paul Goldschmidt because Paul Goldschmidt's an MVP, but similar guy, a right-handed hitting, small college first baseman, like a mid-major conference, with a very quiet approach, who hit for more power and turned out to be a little more athletic than anybody gave him credit for. Well, Hoskins isn't quite as explosive and he's not quite as athletic, but he's another one. It's a very quiet swing, and yet he makes harder and more consistent contact than anybody thought he would. And he's continued to do it as he's moved up. First he was doing it in Lakewood. Well, he's too old. Then he does it in Reading. Well, hey, that's a good home run park. Well, now he's still doing it in AAA. At some point you run out of excuses. You got to say, this guy's clearly just a better hitter than scouts thought he was.
Okay, Keith Law's with us here. Now, at this stage of the season, the Phillies are horrendous. Is Matt Klentak, are you comfortable with the job he's doing? Should he have been making some moves, calling guys up, or do you like the fact that he has remained patient and hasn't really buckled under pressure to start making some major moves?
No, I like the patience. This is a job, this kind of rebuilding GM job requires patience. You look at what Jeff Luhnow did in Houston and how the patience paid off. If anything, Luna was even more aggressive at just dumping. He was fine with getting worse in the short term if it made them better in the long term. And that's why I said, we get to July, and if there's any market for Maikel Saunders, great, trade him. Trade him for a minuscule piece. The Astros made a bunch of trades like that where they traded Bud Norris and ended up getting two useful parts for their system. Bud Norris was terrible. But it was because he was so aggressive and was willing to trade anybody who was on the Major League roster that Luna was able to remake that Astros farm system in, I think, a relatively short period of time, given how bad it was when he took over. That's the one thing I would ask Klentak to do in the next 6 weeks. Trade everything that's not nailed down, explore every opportunity, and then when you get to August 1st, you can start calling up some of these kids because they do have enough guys to fill some of these spots. If they trade a Saunders, if they trade anyone out of the rotation, if there's a market for Hellickson, you've got guys you can call up. They may not be great, but you can at least backfill from within the organization, maybe take some looks at some other guys.
So overall, you feel that Klentak has got this team in the right direction, that he has done a good job?
Yes, I do think so. Now, the proof is in the pudding. Some of these players have to actually get to the big leagues and perform. But I think so far, what are we, a year and a half into the Klentak-McPhail era? Yep. They're absolutely on the right track. And, we didn't talk about, maybe this is for another time, but their Latin American scouting continues to be strong. The Lakewood roster and the Clearwater roster, a lot of really good Latin American players there. Probably less hyped because they weren't high draft picks and they're not that close to the big leagues. But these are guys, the Sixto Sanchez's, the Adonis Medinas, the guys we're going to be talking about in a year or so as the next wave of Phillies prospects.
Last thing for Keith Law here. You've given up on Velasquez. You moved him to the bullpen. I know he's got the arm problems. Is that arm trouble enough to say he's not a starter? Let's see if he can be a back end of the bullpen guy.
You know what? So he's never been healthy. He's never had a full healthy season since he was drafted, and I think that's 7 years ago now. I saw him in high school. I always liked the arm. I liked he had velocity. He always had a great changeup. The breaking ball's a little fringy for me, but it's good enough, and he misses bats. Are you comfortable if I tell you on April 1st of every year, I tell you, Vince Velasquez is going to make 20 starts for you this year? They're going to be good starts, but that's all you're getting is 20 starts. Can you plan around that? That might still turn out to be more valuable than having him in the bullpen, but it's a management challenge because now you're essentially saying you got to get those 12 starts from some other guys. And a lot of teams don't want to do that, but I think a creative club can do that, can move around, work around a guy like that where he's going to get hurt at some point, but at least when he's healthy, he's tended to be pretty good.
All right, I always enjoy it, Keith. We'll see where the Phillies roll from here. This season, it's not very fun. Take care,
I can't help you with that, sorry.
Take care, bud.
Yep, my pleasure.